The war in Israel is tragically so much more than the 7 fronts from which missiles are raining upon her. Tragically, it's also being fought from college campuses. It's also being fought from governments of Western democracies around the world that shockingly are standing with the death cult that is Hamas. But it is also coming from the media. Take a look at Piers Morgan, who is simply unable to control himself, to restrain his emotional outburst, as he cannot engage in a rational conversation with British lawyer Natalie, I forget her last name. He's not able to engage with her in a rational debate, but rather keeps on interrupting her in order to try to prove his point, to stand with the death cult of Hamas. And take a look at the beautiful way she answers to him.
Israel has decided no journalists from outside can go in.
For 3 reasons.
And make that assessment themselves.
Yes.
What right does Israel have to do that?
For 3 reasons. Will you allow me to finish?
Well, there are no reasons.
Well, you've
It's
just
none
asked
of
me-
your business whether the journalists view their safety as being at risk.
I'm sorry, you haven't heard the reasons yet. The first, of course, is the safety of the journalists, and I appreciate you don't accept that. The second...
I think it's a load of nonsense.
The second is the safety...
The idea you're doing is that some quaint concern for the safety of journalists is bullshit.
That was reason number one. Reason number two is the ability...
These better get better.
...is the ability of IDF soldiers to be able to conduct this war against Hamas without...
without the journalists getting in the way?
No, without...
They've actually, by the way, they've killed more journalists, in Palestinian journalists, than in any war
Hamas
in
members
modern
wearing
history.
press vests are not journalists. And reason number three...
So none of them are journalists?
And reason number three...
So just to be clear, none of the Palestinian journalists who've been killed are actually journalists.
I said Hamas members.
Oh, they're all Hamas members?
Those that are... And
every
those that
single dead Palestinian journalist is a member of Hamas. Is that your position?
No, listen, I appreciate Piers.
That is also bullshit.
But misrepresenting every
So that's 2 out of 2. What's the
right?
third reason?
Our mutual friend Douglas Murray was embedded with the IDF in Lebanon.
You said the words yourself. I love Douglas, but he was embedded with the IDF.
Right.
He's unbelievably pro-Israel.
Let me finish.
So, of course, he was going to write what he witnessed while embedded with the IDF.
No, let me finish what his experiences there were. The difference is that...
You have to tell me.
There is something I think that you won't have heard. The IDF are able to allow journalists into Lebanon. He wasn't the only one. There were many other international journalists with him.
There have been a tiny...
Those other international journalists with him were very clear.
There have been a tiny handful of journalists led in by the IDF in tightly controlled environments to witness what the IDF were prepared to let them see.
And do you know what those journalists said?
What it needs this war to stop the bullshit, which is out of control, by the way, in this last 3 minutes, is to let international journalists go in and do their jobs. And they will worry with their networks or organisations about their safety, but they should be allowed to do their jobs. And there's only one reason why the Israeli government doesn't want international journalists crawling all over Gaza. It's because they do not want them reporting what they will find. Which, by the way, will include the bodies of thousands of children who you, on the Israeli side, are not counting as you count the terrorists you kill, but who journalists would.
Reason number three is that those journalists that were in Lebanon said that they had to be very careful about what they reported because of what Hezbollah would do to their colleagues in Beirut. The fact that international journalists have sunk to this level, that they would allow their reportage to be controlled by terrorist organizations, Iranian proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah included, is despicable. That is the real issue here that has driven the international...
Actually, it's not. The real issue is...
Of course it is. This is terrorist organisations' propaganda.
Actually, it's not. Let me bring David.
And the fact that you will not allow me to answer a single question
You know what? You've made all your points, and they all, I'm afraid, Natasha, turned out to be bullshit. So let me bring in Dave.
Well done, Natasha Hausdorff, in that extremely hostile environment. I don't think anybody thought of Piers Morgan coming out of that conversation as any more intelligent, because Natasha was just masterful in her ability to handle the toxicity coming out of Piers Morgan. It boggles the mind to think why a person who considers himself a sane, rational, independent thinker would support the death cult that is Hamas. Does he not understand that Hamas embeds itself in the press corps, that they intimidate journalists with threats to their colleagues, as Natasha was just explaining, coming from the source of Douglas Murray, where there is video footage of Hamas members wearing press credentials, Hamas reporting them as journalists that were innocent journalists that were killed, when in fact these were participants in the October 7th attacks. In fact, these are very, very difficult times in which we live. The Talmud tells us that the very last generation of exile, the generation that will welcome the Mashiach, will have the face of the generation that is like the face of a dog. Now, what does that mean? That the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. Dogs have beautiful faces. Dogs are very pretty to look at. Maybe not an English Mastiff, but, most dogs, like an Alsatian, a German Shepherd, beautiful. They're very, very good looking. What does it mean that the face of the generation is like the face of the dog? Our sages explain, and this is written 2,000 years ago, that the face of the generation is the leadership of the generation. In this case, perhaps it refers to the media that represents the stories. Will be like the face of a dog. When a dog walks with its master, it's the dog that looks like he's walking in the front, but really the dog is constantly looking over his shoulder. Whilst he gives the impression of leading, he is actually following his master. He's leading by looking over his shoulder just to make sure that the master is still behind him. And in fact, if the master takes a corner, then he's going to run back and run in front of the master once again. It means that leadership will not be leadership at all. What the Talmud continues to say there at the end of Tractate Sota is that the world will be filled with corruption. It will be impossible to trust leadership because leadership will be entirely corrupt. If there's one positive message we can extract from that awful interview of Piers Morgan, it is that we are certainly coming very close to the fulfillment of the prophecy of where the leadership of the generation, the so-called media, has entirely lost every shred of credibility, not to be able to allow a guest to answer the question that you posed, to try to intimidate and to ridicule the guest through emotional outbursts, is indeed the sign that our sages were telling us in the Talmud 2,000 years ago, and indeed may it be fulfilled, that this war should be ended very soon, an end to all bloodshed. Both Jewish and Arabs' lives should be saved and protected with the arrival of the Messiah, the one that we've been waiting for so many years. May we experience the era of divine consciousness, the dawn of global awareness, the era for which this world was truly destined. And may we all be enlightened to see the good in each other instead of trying to tear each other down in order to lift ourselves up.